We begin with breaking news of a deadly shooting at a Catholic school and church in Minneapolis. Here's a look at the scene right now. The shooter opened fire just before 8:30 local time as a group of children sat in pews celebrating Mass during the first week of school. Police say 2 of the children were killed. 14 other students are among 17 people injured. The shooter took his own life. The mayor of Minneapolis spoke of his anger and sadness, calling the incident an act of senseless violence.
Don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance.
Lilia Luciano is a national correspondent for CBS News and is following the story. She joins me now from New York. So, Lilia, what more can you tell us about how this all unfolded?
Well, Andrew, of course, right now, police, law enforcement from the federal level to state to local are working to trace back what happened. What they have shared so far is that this gunman is a white male in his 20s, that this is a person who approached the church of the Catholic school from the outside and began shooting, that he had a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. And as you mentioned, 2 children were confirmed dead, one aged 8 and 10. 17 others were injured, and 14 of those 17 people were children. Of course, this is a horrific tragedy. We know that the shooter turned one of the weapons on himself and that he's now deceased. This just comes weeks after I was there in Minneapolis covering the killing of a state lawmaker, a calculated and horrific attack that also shocked the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. And now we're seeing this unthinkable tragedy. Law enforcement are right now on the scene. We've learned from tweets posted by the FBI, by Director Kash Patel, that there are agents on the scene. Also by Attorney General Pam Bondi, that there are federal agents on the scene. We know that President Trump called Governor Walz to share his condolences and that he was briefed in the shooting. And of course, that all agencies are right now all hands on deck to try and investigate and bring answers as soon as possible.
And of course, many of those answers still to come, as this has just happened at just hours ago. What is local law enforcement saying at this point?
Well, they're sharing a little bit of information. They are sharing that police officers immediately responded to the shooting, that they entered the church and attempted to provide first aid. We know that 2 of the children who were injured are currently in critical condition, that the parents of the children who were wounded and, of course, of the 2 children who were deceased have been notified. And, of course, as I mentioned, too, that the gunman shot himself in the back of the church. They said that what they have described so far is that this gunman approached from the outside of the church and that the children were sitting in those pews in the church. This is a Catholic church, so they were attending Mass as part, I'm sure, of their back-to-school activities. This is happening, as we've seen in the past, just as school is starting, as children are getting back to school after the summer, and that, of course, the motive, we're far from learning, but that the shooter is deceased and that local law enforcement is cooperating and working together with federal agencies who are on the ground.
And Lilia, you mentioned that this has reached the State House and the White House. What more are we hearing from them?
You know, Andrew, I was looking for the communications coming from the governor and from the White House, and it just shocked me that when you go into Governor Tim Walz's Twitter, he still has the photo honoring the life of the state lawmaker, of the Minnesota speaker who was killed just weeks ago. So far, what we've seen is President Trump has been briefed on the shooting at Annunciation Catholic School, that they will the governor and the president spoke, and as I mentioned, that the federal agencies, especially the FBI, the ATF, are all there. The ATF they reported that they had recovered the weapons on the scene, but that, of course, right now the White House and the federal agencies are supporting the investigation of those local law enforcement officers who rushed into the scene to provide emergency emergency aid to the children and to the other adults who were critically or who were wounded in the shooting.
Lilia, thank you. That is CBS News national correspondent Lilia Luciano in New York.